Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 15th January 2025 and today we have some important articles along with one mains related practice question. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles. But before that we have one mains practice question. So this question is about data localization. Recently, the central government has also released rules regarding the personal data protection. So therefore, in this context, so there's an article about data localization and parental verification, and those two aspects actually weigh most on tech industry's minds, right? So in fact, RBI has already issued guidelines with respect to data localization. So in this context, we'll understand what exactly is data localization and what are the pros and cons of data localization. Now, why government is focusing on localization of data, right? So this is particularly in the context of data privacy, keeping in mind that Indians data should not be exported to other countries where there is a chance of that particular data is being used against country's sovereignty, territorial integrity, as well as security. So particularly the concerns with respect to the security, so data localization policies were actually brought in. Now in this context, the question is data localization policies, while allowing government agencies to regulate the data efficiently, right? So these policies would allow the government to regulate the data much more efficiently and effectively. But there are concerns that data localization could possibly hinder the growth of global trade and investment, right? Because we are living in a globalized world. Now, in this context, examine the pros and cons of data localization for India. Now, in this context, there is some information with respect to data localization has been given. So you can go through this particular data with respect to data localization. Now understand what exactly is a data localization. Now data localization essentially means that storing the data, right? So we have to store the data that is generated within the territorial boundaries of India, right? So that is essentially data localization, and in fact it is a policy initiative that limits the data flow by restricting the physical storage as well as processing of the data that has been generated within the boundaries of a specific jurisdiction. And in fact, in June 2019, RBI gave clarifications with respect to data localization, with respect to rules. And these RBI's clarification or RBI's rules regarding data localization, stating that in the case of processing is being done abroad, so the data which is generated in India, but that particular data is stored or processed abroad, the data should be brought back to India in not less than 24 hours. So in just 24 hours, that data must be brought back to India, and also the data should be deleted elsewhere as well. So this is what the data localization norms have been specifying, so that the data which is stored, which is processed, would be safe, right? Particularly the data with respect to India. However, with respect to the cross-border transactions, a copy of data can be stored abroad as well. However, there are certain issues with respect to data localization, and we need to understand those issues as well, because the first part of the question is you need to write the cons of data localization. Now there are some issues with respect to data localization, because as of now in India, so we do not have a well-developed infrastructure, right? So in order to store a data, in order to process data that has been generated in India, you need to have a robust infrastructure, but we lack such robust or well-developed infrastructure, because a well-developed infrastructure would ensure safety and security of the data that has been being generated, stored and processed in India. So it will be very difficult for the authorities to store, process data if we don't have the well-developed architecture or well developed infrastructure. And in fact, so if you look at the developed countries such as European Union, so most of the countries in European Union, Australia, Canada, US, and even for that matter Japan, so those developed countries already have an efficient infrastructure, but we are lacking such an efficient infrastructure. So therefore, one significant disadvantage here is that, so India just rushing towards data localization, so this may not be considered as a wise step because we do not have robust infrastructure, and that is required. And because if you don't have a robust infrastructure, the data is highly vulnerable to the cyber attacks as well, right? So particularly the personal data would be vulnerable to cyber attacks or cyber security threats. And the risk is severe here, risk with respect to the cyber security risk. Okay, so here the risk is very high because it's financial data. So most of the data is financial data. If financial data is leaked, and then that would have significant consequences for the people. But as laws are made, it is a big challenge to develop efficient infrastructure at a faster pace. Now, one thing that we need to understand here is that India still lacks the required amount of finances as well as the technical manpower as well. Both finances as well as technical manpower is very, very important to develop infrastructure, and at the same time efficient usage of those infrastructure facilities, we require manpower as well. So therefore, this is another disadvantage that we have been facing when it comes to the data localization. And after that, storing data in India, it also involves higher operational cost as well. As of now, we have been generating data, but data is not stored in India, right? So several companies they prefer to store data in other countries, but due to the national security concerns, the government has been setting some rules and regulations with respect to data storage, and that leads to the data localization. However, in India, if we wanted to store data, if we wanted to process the data, so it costs us a lot, right? So it costs us a huge amount of money, thereby it substantially increases the operational costs for the payment system operators. Because in other countries they have a robust infrastructure, they have cheaper alternatives as well to store data, to process data, but in India so far we do not have such a robust such a robust infrastructure, and it would also substantially increase the operational costs as well. And in fact, for cross-border transactions, they have to store the data in two places, right? So data is being generated in one country and that data is being stored in other country, or company which has its bases in two different countries. So that comes as part of the cross-border transactions. So they have to store data in two different places, and that would also substantially increase the operational costs of those countries, and at the same time it would also impact the investment and trade between these two different countries. Because remember that the globalization has linked the entire world, because there is a higher chance that that cost would further substantially increase, and there's also a probability that these extra costs may pass on to the consumers as well. So this is also much more problematic for the consumers, because it would be unaffordable for the consumers to bear such higher costs. And in fact, we all knew that innovation in any ecosystem thrives when there is no high financial burden on the companies, on the consumers, right? So we need to encourage innovation. That is very important for a country like India. But so we need to make sure that the operational costs would not be too much high, and hence data localization laws may threaten the innovation attempts in data payments industry. And in fact, data localization may also result in government surveillance of its citizens as well. right? So it may result in the surveillance. So surveillance in the sense that Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, we all knew that this is, being part of the fundamental rights, right to privacy. It is part of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So there are concerns that when a data localization takes place in a one single country, or the country where data is being generated, so that could also have the possibility of countries having a surveillance on citizens and curtailing the civil liberties of the people. So these are some concerns, or I could say that these are cons of data localization. However, there are certain arguments in favor of data localization as well. So we need to look at the other side of the issue as well. So there are certain arguments which are in favor of data localization. Sovereignty and the government functions, that actually requires, now it's not about sovereignty, security, territorial integrity of any country. That, for example, a huge amount of data is being generated from TikTok, and that data, the Chinese authorities have access to that particular data, and there's a lot of information which may be classified or considered as a sensitive information. So such a sensitive information may pose threats to the national security, and it would also threaten the sovereignty of our country as well. So therefore, in this context, so we are a sovereign nation, and every government has some sovereign functions as well. So in the interest of national sovereignty, the government is empowered to impose such regulations, such rules on data being openly shared with other countries, or stored, processed in other countries as well. Now apart from that, the second claim is that the economic benefits will accrue to the local industry, right? So when we store the data in India itself, so that would poise to benefit the local industry as well, in terms of creating the local infrastructure. It would result in employment generation, and it would also contribute to AI ecosystem, and it would also contribute to big data analytics, all those different aspects as well. So it would also create a huge employment opportunities, particularly gainful employment opportunities. And apart from that, regarding protection of civil liberties of individuals, and there is an argument that the local hosting of data will enhance privacy and security by ensuring Indian law applies to the data, and users can also access the local remedies as well, right? So these are certain pros of data localization. Now in this context, it is very important that when you write pros and cons, you should also come to a balanced judgment whether data localization is good or not. If it is good, how India can move forward, or way forward, right? So the way forward is that there should be a multi-stakeholder approach that has to be taken into consideration, because this multi-stakeholder approach will help looking not only at data or data localization, but also other issues such as privacy and even the governance related aspects, right? And apart from that, data encryption rather than delocalization would also be another way forward, right? Because we are living in an age where rapid technological growth has been taking place. We are also living in an age where globalization has been defining the living standards of the people, and therefore government should shift to alternate standards of data encryption, so that could ensure protection of the data, right? So it is very important that we need to protect the personal data, if it is a financial data or any other sensitive information, right? So apart from that, globalization approach has to be followed, wherein laws can be harmonized globally, but by paying attention to local interests as well. So we need to look into the global dimension or the global aspect of the data localization. Apart from that, when we are framing a global law, because we are living in a globalized world, and those laws should also adequately take into account the local interests as well, right? So that is considered as a holistic approach or a globalization approach. And apart from that, access to the security of domestic systems for storing sensitive data would also be allowed, right? So finally, I would say that data localization is a good move on the part of government of India when it comes to protecting sovereignty, security, and the territorial integrity of our country. And it is also very important that we need to have a strong infrastructure, particularly in the sense that such an infrastructure will be able to ensure that whatever data is being stored is being well processed or well protected. And at the same time, this data localization would also result in reduced operational costs and also result in gainful employment opportunities generation in the long term, right? So that's how you can actually conclude this answer. And the next topic is about H1B visas. So H1B is is a debatable issue between India and America relations whenever we're talking about this. And Donald Trump's regime, Donald Trump is going to become the president of US for the second term. So now in this context, so how USA will start looking at this H1B visa that would potentially benefit the skilled manpower from India who are looking for the opportunities in US, right? So we'll try to discuss about this aspect as well, because H1B visa is a very important issue, and there is a potential that this question might be asked in general studies paper 2 as well. So the ongoing debate in India about the potential implications of Donald Trump's second term as a US president, particularly regarding technology policies, right? So US President Donald Trump would take a set of technology policies, and it is also important for us to understand the impact of those policies on India, including the talent export, technology talent export, data governance, and even the geopolitical strategies. And apart from that, H1B visa and immigration policy would be the issue. So that is the center of debate between India-US relations in the context of Donald Trump's second term as a US president. So the debatable issue or the debate around H1B visa is a contentious issue, and there's no doubt about that between India and US. However, a technology industry in US has been very often actively advocating for a skilled immigration, right? So skilled immigration would benefit the technology industry in India, but in USA, but at the same time addressing the key concerns of anti-immigrant sentiments in US, right? Because in US, there is a kind of an anti-immigration sentiment, and Donald Trump during his campaign actively advocated for anti-immigrant policies. So therefore, there should be a balance between attracting skilled manpower into US and also limiting this anti-immigrants, or limiting this immigrant, coming illegal immigrants or immigrants coming to US. And Trump's second term would focus on balancing immigration needs with a more strict control over the illegal entry of immigrants. And we all knew that India is a major supplier of tech talent or technology talent, and in this context, India unlikely to lose out in the H1B system, because a majority of the tech talent in USA originate from India. Because in USA, a demand for a skilled Indian professional is very, very high. So therefore, in this context, we are being optimistic that India would not likely lose on H1B visas, H1B visa quota for India. However, India needs to cooperate more on preventing illegal immigration. So India should always try to cooperate with USA with respect to preventing illegal immigration. So that would help India, by US issuing more H1B visas for the skilled manpower, right? So at the same time, India should also support legal and merit-based immigration channels as well. And in fact, in the US, the bipartisan tensions between, on the one hand, supporting skilled immigration for economic growth, and on the other hand, curtailing illegal immigration, so they remain highly unresolved, complicating this H-1B visa issue, right? So we need to look into Trump's technology policies as well in this context. It is expected that in the second term of Donald Trump as a president of US, technology policies likely deepen the political polarization in the US, right? So how it would deepen the political polarization, we'll try to understand this. And in fact, there are social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, so they have been time and again accused of bias when it comes to the presidential elections, right? And in fact, the shift in platform policies could affect both US and also the global political dynamics, with potential spill over to the other democracies as well. And in fact, Trump, during his campaign, so he aligned with some techno libertarians like Elon Musk and also Peter Thiel during the campaign. And it is expected that this alignment of Donald Trump with techno libertarians would lead to the deregulation of emerging technologies from US side, and also shifting focus from ethical oversight to more innovative driven or innovation driven policies, especially the artificial intelligence development. And Trump's technology policies, particularly in the context of competition with China, could lead to intensified technology and military confrontations as well. So in first regime of Donald Trump as well, we have seen that there was a rivalry that took place between US and China with respect to origin of COVID-19 pandemic and also trade war. So therefore his administration is expected to pursue a more aggressive stance against China, particularly on technologies like artificial intelligence and even the defense technologies as well. Now, what are the major implications for India's tech diplomacy? So with the Donald Trump's second term, Trump's policies could strengthen US-India collaboration. There's no doubt about that. Trump's second term, or Trump as a US president, would be seen as a good for India, good for India's relations with US, right? So it would further strengthen, it would further deepen India's relations with US in many arenas, right? So therefore, this would further strengthen the collaboration in the areas of technological innovation, especially in technologies or emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and traditional collaboration in the areas of defense and security, despite there are some differences between these two countries over data localization and trade policies as well. And in fact, remember that Trump has increased tariffs on Indian products as well, not just Chinese products but Indian products as well. And apart from that, so India's strategic positioning in the global tech race, particularly in collaboration with US, will further be shaped by Trump's overall stance on China and the technological sanctions. Now, there's no doubt that India's relations with US would be impacted by India's US relations with China. So India may face challenges balancing its relationship with both US and China in the tech sector. Now, India's diplomacy will need to find a common ground with US on technology and defense while navigating Trump's policies, including potential shifts in global governance and emerging technologies, right? So the next is California wildfires and some lessons that have to be learned, because wildfires has become it's not a new phenomenon because of climate change. So wildfires have become rampant, and recently we have seen devastating California wildfires. So the context is that the crisis of wildfires in California has highlighted some societal, political and environmental issues surrounding these wildfires, and it is reflecting on the state's social social, economic, and cultural changes over a period of time, thereby questioning progressivism, technology, and media in shaping public responses to these natural disasters. So, we'll understand California's crisis and its larger impact. And in fact, California recent times has been getting, it is frequently threatened by these wildfires. Yet, the state of California remains a symbol of the Californian dream. And in fact, the constant threat of these disasters, particularly in Southern California, creates a sense of insecurity among the people of California. And in fact, there is an increasing polarization in California, and that is being reflected in how residents and the media actually reacting to these issues, particularly the wildfires, which are being caused by the climate change. Right, so there are issues like climate change, the political ideologies which have been dominating the debates instead of focusing on the real issue or root causes of these wildfires, and identity politics also dominate the discussions, so thereby obscuring the political responses to the crisis like wildfires. And Californian identity has evolved dramatically in recent times, from being a beacon of the American dream to becoming a symbol of societal dysfunction as well. And in fact, it was once considered as a symbol of opportunity, California, because it provides, numerous opportunities for the people. But now California is being ravaged or is being devastated by wildfires very frequently, and it embodies the potential of greatness as well as the pitfalls of unchecked progressivism in California. And what is the discourse of media, public, and the technology about this wildfires, which actually diverting the attention from focusing on the real issue or the root cause of the issue of these forest fires? And in fact, it is being said that social media has been distorting the public understanding, where the reality often becomes a battleground for ideological narratives. So it is being viewed from the ideological lenses instead of being viewed from the real root cause of the problem. And in fact, there's also a blending of facts and misinformation, and that also complicates efforts to address crises like wildfires that took place in California. And in fact, political discourse has shifted focus from practical community issues. There are a lot of practical community issues such as fire risks to the global and ideological concerns, whether disinvestment or divestment or international policies that showcasing there's a disconnection from the local realities. So this debate actually reflects there's a disconnection from the local realities. And in fact, the discourse in California is increasingly driven by the ideological extremes, and some people view wildfires as a consequence of climate change, but on the other hand, some people view the wildfires in California as a product of progressive policies, right? So in fact, these ideological diversions on the part of the people, this ideological rift weakens the collective action at times of crisis. However, so there is a call for reconnection and reflection when it comes to this wildfire issue. So California has lost its cultural and spiritual roots, with residents and policymakers very often prioritizing the technocratic solutions and ideological battles over addressing the real challenges like fire prevention, even environmental sustainability. And in fact, the author has also called for more grounded, respectful relationship with nature and involving or invoking indigenous wisdom to guide the ecological practices, right? So this is what has to be done instead of having an ideological rift over the Californian wildfires. And that's how we could address such a problem, because it has been become rampant in recent times, and there is also increasing intensity and frequency of such fires. It has resulted in economic loss as well as the loss of lives, And this includes rethinking of consequences of unchecked development or unchecked progressivism, thereby addressing the root causes of environmental destruction. However, here the broader question posed is about humanity's growing disconnection from the sacredness of nature and its consequences. However, this article specifically suggests to prevent future disasters, societies must confront the false casualties and distractions which are being created by the ideological divides that is involved around Californian wildfires. So next is centers reach out to Jammu and Kashmir, particularly with respect to infrastructure push. Right, the context is that the central government is we all knew that the central government is focusing on development in Jammu and Kashmir. So after the abrogation of Article 370, so how the government is focusing on development? The government is giving a sustained push to infrastructure development and also economic initiatives that could generate large-scale employment opportunities for the people in Jammu and Kashmir. And in fact, the center has also time and again emphasized on the development of the region, particularly through tourism, infrastructure development projects, economic initiatives as part of the strategy to improve the economy of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, because it could have a multiplier effect on the development of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And in this context, economic development will be a focus area. So center has identified tourism as the key sector, right? So tourism has been identified as a key sector to generate large scale employment, and because this tourism will also support small businesses and it also improves Jammu and Kashmir's financial situation as well. And the government has been focusing on investment in infrastructure, which is aimed at boosting tourism industry that can have a long-term economic benefits for the region. And a significant infrastructure development initiative worth over 40,000 crore has been initiated, including national highway projects and also Sonmarg Tunnel. These efforts aim to improve connectivity, foster economic growth, and also ensure Jammu and Kashmir is better integrated with the rest of the country as well. And in fact, the development projects that have been taken up in Jammu and Kashmir are essential for improving Jammu and Kashmir's infrastructure and financial stability. This push aims to strengthen local economy. It enhances job opportunities, and it would also foster more sustainable economic environment for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, in this context, we'll understand the future prospects and the governance in Jammu and Kashmir, so that could reshape or reorient relations between Jammu and Kashmir and central government. So although restoration of statehood remains a priority for Jammu and Kashmir's leadership, it is clear that this particular process will take a lot of time. So it will not be done immediately, and both center and Jammu and Kashmir's political leadership seem to be cautious in their approach, focusing on pragmatic developmental goals. The center's handling of both economic and political commitments in Jammu and Kashmir will be closely observed, and successful implementation of infrastructure and developmental plans will shape future political dynamics in the region. And in fact, the overall focus will be on ensuring Jammu and Kashmir's long-term economic growth, political stability, integration with India's broader developmental framework. And the trajectory of this development will depend on continued cooperation, strategic decision making at both local as well as the national levels, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.